1980 was the darkest timeline for rock star deaths. We lost Bon Scott of AC/DC. Ian Curtis's suicide ended Joy Division. John Bonham's death ended Led Zeppelin. And of course, some crazy person shot John Lennon. But at least Joy Division turned into New Order. AC/DC got Brian Johnson and only made the second best selling album of all time. And the Phillies finally won a World Series. Fun fact, my dad was 29 years old in 1980, and so was I when they won it again in 2008. I'm getting old.
Oh no! Snakes don't have lives. I feel so bad for snakes because I can't pick things up.
Let's organize this list. Now it's my PlayStation. Now it's my car. Now, let's go.
This was my food.
Or keep still while I'm talking to people. I always have to walk around in a circle like an irritating 4-year-old.
Hey, welcome to Snakes Without Arms. This is Nick Karn, a one-man band, Physical Illusion, and today I'm counting down my 15 favorite albums in 1980. I'm probably biased, but there's not as many 4.5 or 5-star releases for me as 1979. There's still a bunch of 4s and solid 3.5s for my honorable mention list, so I'll get into it now. My number 15 is Freedom of Choice by Devo, released on May 16th. Despite the fact that the band are becoming stylists with their smash single Whip It, and increasingly relying more on synths than guitar, as well as 1980 whiplash drums on It's Not Right. This is my favorite album from the band, as it presents 12 really fun synth pop / new wave songs with simple but effective riffs in a tight 32 minutes. My favorites are probably the aforementioned Whip It with its back and forth exchange of Mark Mothersbaugh and Gerald Casale vocals, the title track with its main riff and political chorus. Freedom of choice is what you got. Freedom from choice is what you want. And the opening Girl You Want, which treats the subject of lust in a super robotic way, the throbbing Gates of Steel, the oh-so 80s part at the end of Mr. Beast Ballroom that's not actually a chorus because it only gets repeated once. Whoa, 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 uh-oh. Whoa, 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 Mr. Beast Ballroom. And the fun closer, Planet Earth, which goes, pleasure follows pain, people go insane, fly around in planes, pray that it won't rain, drive around in cars, get drunk in local bars, dream of being stars, I lived all my life on planet Earth. Hey, let's put a missile on the moon to destroy Washington, D.C. We'll call it the Alan Parsons Project. The Alan Parsons Project are a progressive rock band from 1982. Ass. And before writing that song you hear all the time in NBA games, though, they did a concept album about gambling addiction called Turn of a Friendly Card, released in November. That's my number 14. I could see people dismissing this album on paper as overly clinical adult pop with various AOR-style vocalists that might be a hop, skip, and jump away from Styx if they toned down their overblown operatic pretensions, but in practice stuff like Maybe a Price to Pay with his majestic synth and Eye of the Tiger like lumbering bass line. Games people play with his fun little synth loop and catchy where do we go from here when all the children are growing up are well-written pop songs underneath this slickness. And you can totally feel that the engineer Alan Parsons, who is so important to the sound of Dark Side of the Moon, is here. Of course, his bandmate Eric Wolfson apparently did a lot of the actual songwriting, and it may or may not be coincidental that the song he takes lead vocals on, Time, is probably the most Pink Floyd-sounding song. Well, okay, either that or the instrumental The Gold Bug. The 5-part title track suite that takes up side 2 of the album is where the gambling concept really comes to the forefront, with the lyrics like, but the game never ends when your whole world depends on the turn of a friendly card, and Snake Eyes 7-Eleven, don't let me down tonight. I like snakes. My number 13 is The Age of Plastic by the Buggles, released on January 10th. This album is, of course, most known for Video Killed the Radio Star, Video Killed the Radio Star, Pictures Came and Broke Your Heart, ow, 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 ow. This video was the first ever played on MTV, but there's definitely more than that to this progressive pop / new wave album, or else Yes wouldn't have invited Trevor Horn and Jeff Downs to replace John Anderson and Rick Wakeman for the album Drama, which is actually bubbling under my top 15 as an honorable mention. As this album title suggests, This album does have a plastic sci-fi feel inspired by Kraftwerk, with the various creative synth embellishments, production effects, and lyrics that are apparent right away in the title track, which has a very cinematic feel. They send the park police to put you under cardiac arrest. And as they drag you through the door, they tell you that you failed the test. Wow, 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 wow. Living in the plastic age. Da, 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 da. And songs like I Love You, Mass Robot, with its vocoder chorus, and the quirky clean clean with that Asian style keyboard riff. Dun, 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 dun. And Johnny on the Monorail, which has a great majestic bombast to it that makes it easy to see why they were a good match for Yes at this point. My number 12 is Never Forever by Kate Bush, released on September 8th. Kate goes for a more studio-oriented approach here in testing out her production skills, featuring an assortment of Fairlight synth sounds and drum machines that actually don't sound too artificial or dated. And the great opening single Babushka is about a woman going incognito with someone else to fool her husband, and something tells me that the glass-breaking noises after the verses have ended signify that plan didn't work. And the melodies are pretty catchy, like on the waltzy Army Dreamers and All We Ever Looked For, whose melody is accompanied by whistling the da 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 da, and the lyrics filled with a bunch of literary references come through better to me than in the first two albums. And things get dark on the nuclear war theme Close Their Breathing, as well as the wedding list, which features a bride murdering an entire wedding party. And Egypt has neat, eerie fusion-style keyboards from Max Middleton that totally evoke a desert atmosphere, and violin rocks pretty heavily with the most theatrical vocal wailing on the album. My number 11 is Argy Bargy by Squeeze, released in February. These are pretty well-arranged and clever new wave / power pop songs, some featuring Farfisa organ that was probably used because, hey, they thought it sounded cool and Elvis Costello is this year's model, so why not? The lyrics overall are often about working class British life and relationships, and in the case of the opening, pulling muscles from a shell, British holiday camps, though I get Robin Hood associations with the lines about feeling like William Tell and Maid Marian on her tiptoed feet. There's also interesting use of ugly downbeat chords in I Think I'm Go-Go and Here Comes That Feeling. If I Didn't Love You has the lines about how singles remind me of kisses and albums remind me of plans, as well as the nagging, if I didn't love you. And here's my impression of Jules Holland singing Wrong Side of the Moon. Across the ocean, there's nothing else to do. It feels like you're on the wrong side of the moon. Yeah, they kicked him out of the band because his voice sucks. No, just kidding. And there at the top is a fun chorus. Looking at her map, looking at her map. I'm looking at her watch, looking at her watch. Bags on the rack, bags on the rack. Seems like she's there at the top. My number 10 is Black Sea by XTC, released on September 12th. On this album, XTC were still in the phase of their career where they actually played live shows before Andy Partridge's stage fright stopped them from touring. And there's an energetic, often percussive feel to the songs here. And the lead single, Generals and Majors, is a fun Colin Moulding song about how generals and majors always seem so unhappy unless they got a war. And its whistling solo is, spoiler alert, not the only notable one on an album produced by Steve Lillywhite from 1980. Stay tuned for another one later. And the war theme continues with Living Through Another Cuba, which features some killer drumming in addition to that memorable repetition of the title, as well as some other good stuff I'll get into later whenever I do an XTC ranking video. It's also got one of the most gloriously dorky songs on this list, not written by Rush, and Sergeant Rock is going to help me make the girl mine, keep her stood in line, make the girl mine, wave the victory sign. Da, 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 da. Hey, rock, rock, and rock we will. I'll stay with a Black Album theme for my number 9, Back in Black from AC/DC, released on July 25th. I used to be all anti-hyped about this 50 million selling comeback album because, oh, AC/DC sounds the same. But it pretty much is the culmination of all they were leading up to, with their distinctive take on loud, overdriven rock and roll at its peak. Hell's Bells has one of the best dramatic intro build-ups of any hard rock song I can think of. The title track has one of their most iconic simple riffs, and You Shook Me All Night Long is one of their most iconic overplayed party anthems that you might never need to hear again, but that doesn't mean it's not awesome. And then there's Shoot the Thrill with a line,
I'm like evil. I get under your skin. I'm like a bomb that's ready to blow.
as George Starson put it, how can a bomb get under your skin? And the tribute to Bon Scott,
Have a drink on me.
is another great one, and as well as
Rock and roll ain't noise pollution. Rock and roll ain't gonna die.
and then there's also
Giving the dog a bone, giving the dog a bone.
impersonating Brian Johnson is tiring. My number 8 is probably the biggest dark horse on this list, called thesaurus erectus by Blue Oyster Cult, released on June 14th. The previous two BOC albums have found them trying a bit too hard to have hits in places, but this album returns them to their more slightly off-kilter original sound. The sci-fi epic Black Blade has lyrics written by Michael Moorcock as one of my favorite songs by the band, with a super fun Black Blade, 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 Blade chorus and hooish synth loop that provides a really amazing rush near the end of the song. Monsters has unexpected fast-paced jazz-style sections in place of where a chorus would normally be, as a great main riff. The Marshall Plan is a huge guilty pleasure song for me, with boneheaded power chord riffing, fake crowd noise, a smoke on the water riff before a ridiculous dramatic spoken section where Eric Bloom declares, I ain't gonna play no surf music, I'm gonna play some heavy music. I'm gonna play it bad, I'm gonna play it loud, it's gonna sound like. I don't know what it is about this song, but I love it to death. Maybe the hooish bombast of it that also appears in Black Blade and other songs like Fallen Angel are a big part of the appeal. I dig the fast new wave style Hungry Boys and a horror movie feel of Unknown Tongue as well. Good album. My number 7 is Underwater Moonlight by the Soft Boys, released on June 28th. This album might be the best example of Robin Hitchcock's surreal Syd Barrett meets psychedelic John Lennon and Bob Dylan songwriting, also featuring loud and bright sounding guitars that evoke the color of the album's artwork to me. There's very anthemic tracks like I Wanna Destroy You and Positive Vibrations Shine Through All Creation, as well as the very birdsy Queen of Eyes, along with oddly lumbering tracks that might sound overly dumb at first, like I Got the Hots for You, and I'm an old pervert and I hang under the bridge. I also like the eerie keyboards and lyrics of the fast-paced Insanely Jealous, and I guess on the title track you get a couple drowning themselves to make for a suitably dark post-punk close to the album. My number 6 is Prince's breakthrough album Dirty Mind, released on October 8th. This album consists of songs recorded in Prince's home studio where he played almost all the instruments himself. And that aspect, as well as the fact that the album's only 30 minutes long, was quickly recorded and has lyrics filled with a lot of sexual themes, like on the song called Head, with the chorus, Head, till you're burning up, head, till you get enough. And this all gives it a very raw demo-like quality. And When You Were Mine in particular is a great pop song about yearning for and liking an ex-girlfriend more post-breakup. And the opening title track is a fun little jam co-written with Dr. Fink, who came up with the keyboard line, dun, 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 dun. And the closer, Party Up, is a hot groove with his high vocals going, Fighting war is such a fucking bore, party up. Dun, 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 dun. Prince, you better watch out with the explicit language in a song about having sex with your sister that's twice your age, because Tipper Gore is watching you. But I'm glad that a 5'2" guy with a super high feminine voice that gets accused of being gay on the song Uptown started becoming this huge star here, at least. Dan, a serious businessman, approves. My number 5 is Permanent Waves by Rush, released on January 14th. And check out the 40th anniversary cover. I just got caught in an intense rainstorm like that and had to change clothes. Anyway, after taking their progressive side as far as it could go with Hemispheres, The band started making the move to shorter, more radio-friendly songs like The Spirit of Radio and Free Will, and did it successfully, although still with a couple epics in there, Jacob's Ladder and Natural Science. I remember buying this album the day after Christmas in 1997 or 1998 and immediately listening to it in the car, so I can't not think of Winter and shutting people out with headphones. And I also cannot hear The Spirit of Radio having the same chord sequence in the verses as Don't Stop Believing by Journey from the following year. Not that that's a bad thing. Also, there was a little British band around this time period that would start influencing Rush's musical direction in a big way for the next few albums. That band would be the Police with my number 4 album, Zenyatta Mandata, released October 3rd. I'm just going to talk right now about how underrated the song Bombs Away is. You know, the goofy Stuart Copeland song about war with a verse about how the general scratches his belly and thinks his pay is good, but his officers stink. And of course, bombs away, but we're okay. Bombs away in old Bombay. Killer bass playing from Sting on that one. And I didn't know until recently it was built out of a Susie and the Banshees backing track from a leftover cassette, which is pretty cool. Also, it's got the schoolgirl lust after teacher anthem, Don't Stand So Close to Me, which has that burst melody later reused in Money for Nothing by Dire Straits, as well as the insanely fun bass ska of Canary in a Coal Mine and the drumming toward the force driven to tears. Some people say there's too much filler on here, with there being 4 songs that are either instrumental or near instrumental, but I dig Voices Inside My Head quite a bit. It's a great song to walk into a room to with the and Behind My Camel is creepy, and Shadows in the Rain has intense guitar fireworks that happen to be placed really, really low in the mix behind the rhythm section, which makes for a neat effect you might miss without awesome headphones. Also, Man in a Suitcase is totally not the same song as Canary in a Coal Mine. No, 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 no. My number 3 is the third album by Peter Gabriel, known as Peter Gabriel 3 or Melt, released on May 30th. I guess this album was kind of a bad influence on 80s music in a way, with the appearance of the gated drum sound brought on by Phil Collins and Jerry Marotta not being allowed to use cymbals, but it totally works on this album, especially on the opening Intruder. And there's no place to hide when a creepy burglar breaks into your house. Do, 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 do. Ah! There's also I Don't Remember, where Peter does a fun sort of David Bowie impression in the verses, the cinematic family snapshot about a presidential assassin, and that other Steve Willywhite produced song with a whistling solo from 1980 to go along with XTC's Generals and Majors in the politically themed Games Without Frontiers. That song also has an appearance of Kate Bush singing in French, where it sounds like she's saying, "She's so funky, yeah." No Self-Control is another cool tension builder with its marimbas. It all closes with the slow and mournful Biko about murdered apartheid activist Stephen Biko, which kind of reminds me of a few somber anthemic U2 album closers to come in the near future like 40, MLK, and Mothers That Disappeared. Rooted into dark territory here. My number 2 is Remain in Light from Talking Heads, released on October 8th. This album continues down the world beat path of E. Zimbra from Fear of Music, especially the super fast-paced horn and percussion craziness of The Great Curve. Of course, the band's collaboration with Brian Eno continues in an even bigger way here, as Eno has a co-write on all the songs and has prominent backing vocals in the choruses of Cross-Eyed and Painless and Once in a Lifetime. There's also some crazy guitar parts from Adrian Belew, especially the video game noises of the opener Born Under the Punches, which might be my favorite Talking Heads song with that otherworldly vibe that's pretty much impossible to reproduce naturally with a full band, and the All I Want Is to Breathe harmonized chorus. A lot of the vocal parts from David Byrne here are actually often spoken rather than sung. When I first heard the big hit single Once in a Lifetime back when I was first getting into music, I decided his nerdy ranting about what you may find yourself doing was really stupid. But I'm glad I came around to the incredibly cool watery keyboard and uplifting, letting the days go by, water flowing underground. Also, I'm weird and literally imagine houses walking down the street during a rainstorm when I listen to Houses in Motion. And then things go all into, hey, I'm Brian Eno. I got an idea. Let's make the album get slower and slower as side 2 goes on. And without actually having heard their music, make the last song sound like Joy Division. And their second and sadly final album, Closer, released on July 18th, is my number one. This album may be pretty much simplistic in terms of chord sequences, and I guess the singing of the late Ian Curtis isn't technically the best in the world, but I don't care, because sound-wise this is a total masterwork. From the weird detached synth pop of Isolation where it sounds like the band is playing in different rooms, to the Eternal which might have the best funeral atmosphere I've ever heard, to Heart and Soul with its drum pounding at the end and calm detached vocals where Ian sounds like he's singing from a cave, to Colony which, with its fat sounding guitar and bass tones. I did point out the tumbling drum pattern and hellish guitar noises of Atrocity Exhibition in my Dave is Boring video, but that song also has one of my favorite opening verses ever. The silence when doors open wide, where people could pay to see inside. For entertainment, they watch his body twist. Behind his eyes, he says, I'll still exist. Also, Decades has one of the most depressing synth lines ever on its D minor and C chords. I think like practically all of side 2 uses those two chords prominently, actually, but they do it in a way that's minimalistic genius. I once proclaimed this as my favorite album of the 80s, and I'm not sure it's still my number one for the decade, but it's up there. Of course, it's one of those albums that, if its style doesn't grab you as a whole, you might have serious trouble with it, but fortunately, it all works for me, so whatever. So that was my top 15 albums of 1980. Totally filmed over the course of one night and not over a week or anything like that. Thanks for watching, hit like and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Bye.